Good afternoon, everybody. I hope everybody is well and that you were able to enjoy some of this beautiful sunshine. I now call this meeting to order, and I'll launch right in. Item 1 is a motion to approve a special rule limiting each speaker to 2 minutes each time they're recognized. A 2/3 majority of those present and voting is required to approve this special rule. Is there any discussion? Host, please initiate the poll.
Give about 10 more seconds if you wish to vote. And last call. There being 133 ayes, 5 nays, and 2 abstentions, the motion prevails.
Thank you. Item 2 concerns administrative responses to Senate actions and is presented for information. Item 3 is a list of recent faculty, staff, and student deaths that have been forwarded for announcement to the Senate. We invite you to observe a moment of silence while we read these names. Judith Buchanan, Hui Xian H.H. Chung, Marianne Davis, Marilyn Gustafson, Christopher Jenin, Louise Kamachnek, Roger Barton, Scott Murdoch, Nicholas Newman, Kenneth Page, Richard Fitzenreuter, Angelique Smith, Pam Van Covering, Reed Kapitsky, Raymond Staffa. Item 4 is approval of minutes from the December 3rd, 2020 University and Faculty Staff meeting. Host, if you could initiate the poll for approval of the minutes.
Again, we'll give about 10 more seconds if you wish to vote. And last call. There being 138 ayes, 1 nay, 7 abstentions, the motion prevails.
Thank you. Item 5 is Lisa German's official introduction to the Senate. Lisa received her BA in History and her Master of Library and Information Science from the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. She publishes, presents, and consults on topics related to library collections, management, planning, policy development, implementation, and assessment. Within the Big Ten Academic Alliance, she has been involved in collaborations related to acquisitions, collections, and technology. Lisa began her career in 1993 at Wright State University in Dayton, Ohio, before returning to her alma mater. In 2005, Lisa accepted a position at Penn State University as Assistant Dean and later Associate Dean for Collections, Information, and Access Services, where she co-led the Google Book digitization project. Lisa was named Dean of Libraries and Elizabeth Rockwell Chair for the University of Houston in 2015, where she led the development of a strategic plan emphasizing student success, research support, and the quality and relevance of collections for campus and global communities. Lisa joined the University of Minnesota as University Librarian and Dean of Libraries on February 28, 2020. She became a McKnight Presidential Professor on July 1st of this year. So please join me in welcoming Lisa. Lisa, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you so much, President Gable, and thank you, Senators, for inviting me here today. It's great to be here at the U. I'm a strong believer in shared governance. I served in the Faculty Senate when I was an assistant professor at the University of Illinois. And I'm very excited that we're working on a strategic plan here. And that's been one of the important things that we've been working on this year, besides dealing with a pandemic and providing library services through that. So thank you so much, and it's great to be here.
Thank you, Lisa. Item 6 is my report, and I'm very pleased to present to all of you today. Very glad to see you. It's been almost a year like this, and I'm sure none of us could have even imagined this time last year that we would be in this position this time this year. But I'd like to start today by recognizing the life and loss of our former CFO and treasurer, Fitzenreuter, who passed away late last month. He served nearly a quarter of a century at the U and crossed over 4 presidencies over a period of 24 years. I know many of you worked very closely with him, and we as a university are far better for his expertise and service, as is everyone who is fortunate to share his orbit. So I know we will all miss him. A lot has transpired since we last met in December. We finished the fall semester successfully. Thank you again for all of your flexibility and creativity as we worked our way through so much uncertainty last semester. And now we are well into the spring. And although neither have been easy, the steps we've been taking have worked. Our positivity rates were amongst the lowest of our university peers, and we have had no confirmed cases of COVID-19 transmission in a classroom or in a research space. Case numbers statewide continue to decrease, as are the numbers of cases on our system campuses. And this is very promising and a real testament to our collective commitment to public health. So we do see the light at the end of the tunnel, but experiences in other states and on other campuses and this general concern about COVID variants remind us of the need to double down on our primary prevention strategies of distancing, masking, hand hygiene, avoiding large gatherings. These behaviors are now more important than ever. Amidst this good news, we have to be somewhat counterintuitive and be extra vigilant, particularly as we await the rollout of the vaccine across the country and here at home. And I'll talk about the vaccine in just a second. But this commitment on this campus and around this system has made an enormous difference. We're very grateful to see this exemplified as the spring semester unfolds. And I thank you for how you have committed to keeping each other safe. It absolutely shows. As part of that safety, testing availability has expanded significantly. Students can test as often as they feel the need. And now, as of this week, all U of M employees across the system, in fact, can access testing at the Recwell site. And I know many of you have kids and have heard the edict from the recommendation from the state to test every 2 weeks. Consider this one of the places where you can do so. With regard to the vaccine, as we look ahead, we are hopeful and we are very committed to being accessible to all of our students, faculty, and staff, and that access be equitable. And I know and join you in your frustration that you hear from your friends and family across the United States. It seems like everybody has received the vaccine except for us or me individually or you individually. There's a lot of variation across the country in how each state is prioritizing their populations for vaccine eligibility and then how they're distributing the vaccine to each of those populations. So we're following, obviously, the instructions and guidance from our governor and our state health department. The way it works is organizations who are approved to provide the COVID vaccine, such as our Boynton Health Service, work under a formal agreement with the state that requires us to carefully follow state-determined eligibility guidelines, and we have to follow them to the letter. So then the state provides vaccine to each approved vaccine provider on a weekly tranche. And that system can be very unpredictable depending on how much vaccine the state has at the time. So we appreciate everyone's patience. I join you in the desire to not need patience, but here we are for the time being as our COVID vaccine team, which is led by Boynton Health, and our HERO team, Health Emergency Response team, that team is led by Jill DeBoer, who is the angel who has guided all of our public health response. They work within this system that they don't control to meet our needs. So for example, Boynton Health has dispensed 2,000 doses on our campuses, based on those state guidelines. The state is continuing continually updating information about vaccine availability. In fact, they released new guidance just a few moments ago, and we will update the SafeU website with that information. That site is updated at least every Monday. We're also working through the Emergency Management Policy Committee, which includes FCC Chair Phil Bullman and FCC Vice Chair Ned Patterson, to keep everyone informed about this, to make sure our processes reflect everyone's voice. That committee is working on other plans as well related to the way in which the pandemic is restricting us for commencement, for summer, for fall semester. Provost Kirsten will go into more detail on each of those things when she makes her report in a few moments. But one of the things that we're discussing at length that I want to bring up for this group is the future of working from home. So we follow the governor's guidance, which is if you can work from home, you should work from home. But I know there is still a lot of uncertainty, and we do everything we can to give you as much information as we can as soon as possible so that you can make your plans. So right now, this work from home alignment with the governor is committed to by the university system through June. And we're discussing the possibility of extending that option to Labor Day. But we're also looking at the future of work from home, the way in which many of us have changed our lives may carry over after the pandemic. So in addition to looking at an extension to Labor Day, we're also looking at all of the policy implications and the consultation that we should do in order to really re-examine what work from home means. So for example, your FCC Chair, Phil Bullman, has been a very strong advocate for how we could expand the number of people who could work from their private offices or their dedicated workspace on their respective campus. So there are some of you who are just so eager to get back to your office and haven't been able to yet. And there are some of you who've been working from home and very much hope that you'll be able to continue to do so. So that complexity requires some pretty robust review of policy and HR guidance. So we're working on all of that now, and we'll roll out announcements as all of that work continues, including, of course, opportunities for consultation. So there's no formal announcement today. I just want to give you an update on where the thinking is with the commitment to a formal announcement as each phase unfolds. I also want to give you some update on bonding, our work with the legislature, budget requests, finances in general. So last week, I testified before the House Capital Investment Committee to share our $264 million bonding request. And on Tuesday, I joined Governor Walz at the Twin Cities campus's newly opened HSEC Health Sciences Education Center building. That building was funded by the 2017 bonding bill. So the governor picked that as the site for this year's announcement. We're very grateful to the governor and lieutenant governor for their strong support of our capital needs and how they see the opportunity for us to improve continually our capital footprint in ways that allow us to best serve our faculty, staff, and students and the state. I want to thank the med school team that hosted the governor a few days ago, and also thank our faculty legislative liaisons, Professor Donna Spanis-Martin and Professor Rob Blair, who've obviously been doing very good work on behalf of the university and advocating for our requests. I also testified last month before the Senate and House Higher Education Committees on our work to address last year's $65 million fiscal shortfall. I've highlighted that the university's fiscal year 2022-2023 biennial budget request is not intended to fix that shortfall. We manage that internally, as we've discussed before this body several times. Our requests going forward relate to the future of the institution, and we've put it into one category this time around: operations and maintenance funding. So specifically, we're requesting $15.5 million increase above our base for fiscal year 2022, and then an additional $30.1 million for fiscal year 2023. In biennial math, that makes our request $46.5 million. I want to explain that number. It is the lowest biennial budget increase requested by the university in over 20 years. And that is intentional to reflect that everyone is tightening their belts and that there are constraints that everyone is coping with, and that we see the state as our partner, that we co-invest in how the university serves and partners with the state, and that everyone is making investments in the midst of deep financial constraints. But it's also a new strategy that we're bringing to the state during this budget cycle to reflect that we're asking for what we need and that we hope to get what we ask for. And our first step in that process is the governor's budget, and the governor's budget included our entire request for the first time in a very long time. So I don't want anyone to think we are asking for less because we think we are less valuable. That is certainly not what is motivating our budget conversations with any of our elected officials. All of our budget requests to the legislature and all of our discussions have orbited around the university's new strategic plan. And at the last board meeting 2 weeks ago, the regents approved the metrics and measures with a refresh of the Minnesota Progress Card and then our new University of Minnesota dashboard. So this is an architecture, a structure, a document that reflects a lot of activity that feeds up from the individual work that we all do in our research, teaching, and service, in our learning as students, in our service as staff, all the way up to the big picture, 30,000 to 100,000, depending on your point of view into what the university system as an institution is doing. So this is a roadmap for us to report where we are, to create accountability, to create just easy to access information, and hopefully some inspiration. And we have been extremely grateful in the midst of everything going on that the Senate has provided robust consultation opportunities, insights, feedback through a variety of committees, individually, and in the face of just unbelievable burdens on your time. So thank you very, very much. And we look forward to continuing to work with you as we implement and as data starts to be reported in this way. As a point of information, now the chancellors are mapping their campus strategic plans to show how they tie into the overall system strategic plan, and some of them, each one actually one-on-one will be reporting to the board on this topic over the next several board meetings if you're interested. Now, of course, the strategic plan happens while we continue to do our good work. So there are many things reflected in the plan that are already underway, and I want to update you on some of those. So for example, on February 12th at the Board of Regents meeting, we heard from Dr. Cedric Alexander. You've heard his name many times. He discussed his comprehensive review of policing and safety, including his final report and recommendations. So his report, as expected, offers truly dozens of proposed recommendations across 8 broad categories, some of which we intend to implement immediately or get underway immediately, including equipping UMPD officers with body cameras, having focused consultation with the mayors in Minneapolis and St. Paul, keeping in mind that this is a Twin Cities report, to keep communication lines open and coordinate as needed, and also to do the policy review for both of those issues. We're looking at purchasing a Guardian app, an example of which is the Rave Guardian app. Think of this as a virtual escort that would be available to all students, faculty, and staff. We're going to be transitioning the Department of Public Safety and UMPD oversight to Senior Vice President Myron Franz as a reflection of the increased importance. And in addition to our continued engagement, I'm working really closely with Vice President Franz and UMPD Chief Matt Clark to operationalize everything. There are also many, many more recommendations in this report. And one of the first things that Dr. Alexander recommended that we do is stand up an implementation committee to look through these recommendations and then see where we need to take next steps. I want to point out, as I talk about how this implementation will work, that Dr. Alexander's report explicitly focuses on improvement, but also recognizes the considerable strengths and quality of UMPD. It's worth noting that the department has taken significant steps to broaden the officer's skills in de-escalation, mental health, cultural sensitivity, community relationships, and that there is good work to build upon. And the MSAFE implementation team will analyze the report in this context, receive feedback from our university community, and then make recommendations to me, to Senior Vice President Franz, to you, in order to work towards our safe campus community in all of the different ways and important ways that we define safety. Safety is a core component of the strategic plan. It appears in both the commitment that addresses administration and operations, in that the police department reports up through that division of the university, and it reflects safety and talks about safety in the context of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that is the way in which we are doing this work going forward. So Humphrey Professor Kathy Quick and Dr. Mylene Colbraith, who is Associate Director of Diversity and Inclusion in the Graduate School, are going to co-chair the MSAFE implementation team. The MSAFE implementation team should work its way out of a job, if you will, by reviewing the recommended action steps and then, as appropriate, distributing those items to the groups that would actually implement. So some of them would go directly to the department, some of them would go to Senior Vice President Franz, some of them will come to the Senate through the Campus Safety Committee. We're working on making sure that all of these pieces work together synergistically as we move forward. So related, even though it's obviously not in the strategic plan, is some of the activity that has happened since George Floyd died and the impact that has had on our community. And we know that in a few days, we as a community and the world will turn their attention to the upcoming trial of former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin. And I'm sure I don't need to tell anybody this, but that trial is scheduled to start on March 8th. So this will be an incredibly challenging time for our community that will affect so many of us, particularly our BIPOC community members. We are issuing different kinds of information as the days unfold, with a particular reminder around the support services available for any of us who find that we need them, mental health and otherwise for students, faculty, and staff. And we're working on some programming that enables our community to be a positive contributor to the intensity and importance and complication and pain of this moment for faculty, staff, and the community at large. And so you'll see announcements about those events as they're scheduled. And if you individually or colleagues, members of your departments are working on such programming and would like them amplified, please don't hesitate to let me know. Another part of the strategic plan that's already well underway is our Student Mental Health Initiative. So we're calling this initiative PRISM, or the President's Initiative for Student Mental Health. It's a system-wide effort, and it builds on the excellent work of many individuals and groups across the system, gets us further along in this very important question, challenge, and opportunity to serve our students really well and do everything we can to maximize every attribute of their success. This is intended to be set up as an ecosystem. So we're looking at how we partner upstream on prevention, how we do research into underlying cause, the treatment that we offer or could offer, and the way in which we as partners, allies, and advocates get the training and information we need in order to successfully fulfill those roles. There is devoted attention to being culturally responsive and thinking about how we can leverage resources that we have so uniquely in our system. And fulfilling this effort will be a very big part of the MPACT 2025 strategic plan that commits directly to student well-being and mental health. So the champions in that effort are our friend, Family Social Science Professor Tabitha Greer-Reed, and Interim Vice Provost for Student Affairs, Maggie Towell. So Maggie has the capacity to take on this work in partnership with Tabitha, because I'm very pleased to say we will be welcoming our new Vice President for Student Affairs, who will be a partner in PRISM and otherwise. Our national search led to the fulfillment of this new position, reporting directly to me. And I'm pleased to say that on March 1st, we will be welcoming Dr. Calvin Phillips. Dr. Phillips has been onboarding actively, and he just moved to Minnesota. If anyone wants to welcome him, he is physically here now. And I'm very grateful to all of our partners in student affairs who are working with him directly to make sure he gets off to a strong start. And I want to thank Michael Go and Dean Jean Quam and the entire search committee for such a successful search. Another search that I want to make you aware of that is also tied to the strategic plan is that we're currently seeking applications for the inaugural position, Senior Advisor to the President for Indian Affairs. This position will report directly to me and furthers the commitment that we all feel but is articulated specifically in the strategic plan to strengthen the university's partnership with Minnesota's tribal nations. This is a core priority, but this work has been underway for some time. Tad Johnson took on a role not too terribly long ago to serve as our liaison with the chairs of all of our tribal nations that are organized through MIAC and otherwise. He's been working actively with different partners across the system, and part of that has yielded some very good news. I want to congratulate Minnesota Transform, which has received a $5 million higher education initiative funded by the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation. This grant will address transformational racial justice across all 5 campuses and the state through public humanities projects and in partnership with local and regional organizations and leaders, including MIAC, the Minnesota Indian Affairs Council. CLA, the Institute for Advanced Study, and other important partners will lead this work. So some good activity to do there, and obviously still more work to do. Other news, good news. In January, the Board of Regents held a special meeting to approve the Department of Defense's investment in a major new manufacturing institute called BioMade, which will be headquartered on the University of Minnesota's St. Paul campus. I want to thank CBS Dean Valerie Forbes, VP Chris Kramer, and many faculty and staff colleagues who worked together to achieve this goal. So as we move ahead with this, we're very much looking forward to the public launch of BioMade this spring and thinking about how this transforms our community in this really interesting area of development. Another advancement that we made directly tied to the strategic plan is on our Rochester campus, where we're excited to unveil Next Gen Med, which is a partnership between the university and the university's Rochester Health Sciences degree, the Mayo Clinic, and Google Cloud. So this is an immersive health sciences learning experience that leverages customized technology and Mayo Clinic mentorship for students pursuing undergraduate degrees in healthcare. It's a cohort model, and the first academic term will be in summer 2022. So students will take courses year-round for 2 full years on an accelerated timeline, leveraging summers and other unique scheduling opportunities in order to earn their degree. It will reduce their time to degree and their expenses as a result, and it's a really exciting innovation. I'm very grateful to the team that led us through this and to our partners at the Mayo Clinic and at Google. I also want to give you an update on an initiative we've launched called Voice, Art, and Community, a UMN series. You've seen me refer to this in the email announcements that we send out. This is a series that we're facilitating that is intended to be a partnership across internal and external stakeholders to highlight important perspectives and voices in our community and offer the chance to connect with artists, particularly artists who are inspired by the very powerful social questions that are called for in these times that we find ourselves in. So the first event was on January 26th, and this was with our friend Resma Monikam, and it was entitled Racial Healing, Equity, and Justice. So that was a wonderful event, and we were also proud to join the Office for Student Affairs, the Robert J. Jones Urban Research and Outreach Engagement Center, or as we call UROC, and other partners in sponsoring this event. So this event was part of the Kellogg Foundation's National Day of Racial Healing. Over 2,300 students, faculty, staff, alums, community members attended. We've had a few events since. These are on the website, and in most cases you can review them again as they were recorded. But I do want to tell you about an upcoming event in this series, which is a virtual poetry reading and discussion on Friday, March 5th at 5 p.m. with Nikki Finney. So Nikki Finney recently received the Wallace Stevens Award. She's a National Book Award winner. She's also my friend, and we were colleagues in South Carolina. She is a tremendous poet, inspiring. If you want to feel in all kinds of good ways, I strongly encourage you to hear her. And professor and poet Douglas Kearney will be exploring how art engages social questions in partnership with Nikki. So I very much hope you will join us for that. So that's my report. I thank you very much for that. And with that, I'll move to item 7, which is questions. We received 2 questions pre-submitted, so I'll take those first, and then I'll take the questions from the floor. So first, CBS Faculty Senator Emily Snell-Rude asked for more details about the university's vaccination plan and also thoughts on returning to in-person teaching and work. So some of this I mentioned during my report. There is a lot of variability across the country. At this point, we've distributed 2,000 doses for those who were within the state guidelines. The state is working on a vaccine ecosystem, and I'm sure you all heard that the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is now coming on board. This bottleneck will break open soon, and we will move a lot faster, obviously, once it does. No one wants everyone to have access to the vaccine and more than we do. This is a shared desire, and we are committed to working with the state and with all of you and with our tremendous team to make sure we get it distributed equitably and according to state guidelines and as quickly as possible. And in a related way, directly related, really. We're talking about work from home in the way that I described earlier, extending the situation that we're in right now, but also thinking about the future flexibility and the guidance that we need to create together in order to think about how to do that. Provost Croson will go into more detail about that too. But Emily, did that cover your question? Do you have any follow-up?
Thank you very much for that added detail.
Okay, thanks, Emily. Hey there. All right, our second question pre-submitted was from Student Senator Emily McGuire from the School of Public Health, who asked about recent changes to the Board of Regents policy on alcoholic beverages on campus and promoting health and well-being, and how this policy change was consulted. So just for everybody's information, the amendment to the policy allows the university to consider revenue generating advertising and licensing opportunities. This policy is not about the sale of alcohol, which was long since approved. This is only about advertising. With our approval, we are now amongst 12 of the 14 Big Ten institutions that allow alcohol advertising, of course, directed very specifically and only at legal age adults. So the university is proceeding very carefully to ensure that this advertising and licensing are implemented consistent with our commitment to public health and well-being. Advertising is only allowed on campus and venues that can already serve alcohol, nowhere else. And a portion of the annual revenue generated from this promotion and marketing will go to education and counseling programs related to the topic at hand. The policy amendment was fully consulted with chancellors across the system, the University Senate Consultative Committee, the Student Senate Consultative Committee, COGS, PSG, MSA, and Boynton Health. So Emily, any follow-up?
Yeah, Emily McGuire, she, hers. I guess maybe I just disagree with the policy, but I would also say I think it's important to recognize that the kind of hypocrisy of using money that we make via alcohol sales to try to solve a problem with alcohol. I think from a public health standpoint, that doesn't really make sense to me. So I would just voice that opinion again. And I think it's, again, hypocritical to write in emails about how we're a tobacco-free and drug-free campus and kind of tell students that they have to take all these COVID precautions because we care about public health. But then on the other hand, kind of disregard public health when it comes to alcohol. So those would be my follow-up concerns. But since it's already passed, I mean, I would just consider those things.
Thank you. So host, if you could open the channel to questions from the floor. And I see, I'll go ahead and call on Scott since he's had his hand raised very patiently for quite some time now. Scott?
Hi, Scott Petty, Student Senator from CFANS. This year, I'm occupying one of the 2 student seats on the Alumni Association board. Frequently, you join us at our board meetings. I think your chief of staff was there for the Thursday meeting. So at the Thursday board meeting of the Alumni Association, we spent some time talking about an outside group called Maroon and Gold Rising. And then on Friday, the day after our meeting, an article was published in the Star Tribune by Ryan Faircloth about Maroon and Gold Rising that had some comments about some formal or informal lobbying that former President Eric Kaler is doing within the context of the regent selection process. I was wondering if you could take a moment and just kind of publicly comment. What do you know about Maroon and Gold Rising? What contacts have you or the university had? Have you had any conversations with Eric Kaler or any members of the regents about this outside group, Maroon and Gold Rising? Just kind of as a point of information for all of us.
Sure. Thank you for the question. So first of all, I don't have a chief of staff, but Bill Haldeman, who works in my office, is a member of the board of the Alumni Association. So that's why he was there, just in case there was any confusion about that. So my understanding is that Maroon and Gold Rising is it is not a part of the university. It's a totally separate entity. And I know it exists. We have communicated with them when we asked them to change their use of trademarks, and otherwise we have had no communication with them at all.
Do you have any reaction to the reports? I mean, I don't know if the reports in the Star Tribune were accurate. And I know that some communications were sent to the Alumni Association. Do you have any reaction to any of the reports that were published in the Star Tribune about their activities?
I don't.
Thank you.
Other questions? Rebecca?
I'm Rebecca. I am a CLA student senator. I use she, her pronouns. I was just wondering if you could comment a little bit more on the new program for free tuition for students from lower financial backgrounds. Super exciting program. Just wondering if you could give a little bit more detail about that if somebody else wasn't going to report on it today.
Sure, happy to. The strategic plan has a commitment to ensuring that students, that ensures the financial accessibility of students to all of our programs and across our system. And so some of the specific ways in which we're approaching that include a variety of steps, commitment to lowering average student debt, several things, and anyone can look at this who's curious, it's all up and available online. But one of the specific things that we wanted to do was join many of our peers who have made what I would call a last mile commitment, that students whose families' adjusted gross income is at $50,000 or less don't have to pay tuition. And the thinking behind this is, as you might expect, students whose families have that total earnings already are eligible for quite a bit of aid, and often and very possibly also receive merit support regardless of their financial circumstances. But we wanted to make sure that we could make the commitment that for the duration of their studies, that aid would be consistent all the way through and could be counted on, because there is a disproportionate number of students who fail to progress due to financial reasons based on their own financial background. So by making this a commitment and finding the resources to guarantee that last mile from federal aid, state aid, philanthropic support, we're able to ensure that students in this category don't have to, that their progression towards degree is not hindered by financial access. So we're very excited about this, very grateful to how admissions and financial aid have worked together on this. A lot of this happens because of philanthropic support. So obviously we're very grateful to our donors. So Rebecca, does that answer your question? Happy to take follow-up.
It does. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Great. Okay, I believe next is Penny Edgell. Hi, Penny.
Hello, I'm trying to start my video. It's not letting me start my video. There we go. Hi, so thank you. My question is about an announcement we received from our CLA Dean today in his newsletter about looking ahead for budget projections. And it said that of course, the university is making different budget projections based on different scenarios, including different scenarios in terms of the level of state support. But under one scenario, there is a projection of no raises for employees in the next fiscal year. And under other scenarios, there is a projected 1.5% raise. I just looked up the inflation rate for this last year into this year, and it's projected to be 2.1 to 2.3%. So we've gotten a lot of verbal thank yous from you and other university leaders. You've expressed a great deal of appreciation for the amount of work that people have put in to switch classes online. It has been an enormous amount of work. It continues to be an enormous amount of work. It is disruptive of research and really of everything else as well that we're trying to accomplish. But I think people have thrown themselves into it. They've done the work, and you've expressed a great deal of appreciation verbally. I'm wondering if there is any way to get the university leadership to consider expressing appreciation in a way that would actually matter to people and have an impact on their lives, which would be adequate compensation. Thank you.
Thank you. That is a totally fair question. And while my appreciation is sincere, I know it only gets us so far. So we are still in the midst of frankly, at this exact moment, the worst of it financially. And we've been navigating through, but we're not done yet. And it is my absolute priority that if we have any possible way, by virtue of state support or otherwise, to have raises this year, I wish that wasn't a question, and I wish they could be more. But we're being circumspect in getting through this financial crisis in ways that allow us to also keep costs to students down. These levers are hard to get synced up in the kinds of constraints that we're in right now. But I am aware of the importance of compensation as the most tangible expression of appreciation. and it is a priority with the budget team to get those raises to you now and in the future at the highest level possible. Penny, you're muted.
I was just saying I will learn how to use Zoom just as we no longer. It goes more smoothly when I'm teaching my class, and it's not the end of a day. So I thank you. I appreciate that. I'm going to, this is, I guess, just a follow up, is I would urge you to communicate that to folks, to faculty and staff, and in writing, some kind of projection or a plan or a commitment about a time frame for considering compensation. People really fell behind with the salary reduction and the furlough and all of the added expenses that people have faced in other ways. I mean, in some people have had fewer expenses because they're not commuting and they have some other things, you know, that have kind of evened things out. But I would really urge you to develop some kind of plan to communicate to people, because I think there's widespread concern about this. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Other questions? Okay, let's move on then to item 8, which is the provost report. Provost Croson.
Thank you. Thank you all. Today, I'm going to be talking about a number of topics, roughly in some kind of chronological order. Many of these are going to be communicated more broadly in a series of emails next week and beyond, but I wanted to be sure to present them here first and to get feedback from you all on any or all of these. Let me start with talking about transparent face shields for instructional use. So as the science and our understanding of the transmission of this virus has evolved, so has our policy. We're now in a world of double masking, which was not something any of us could have anticipated. And so we have adjusted our policy slightly. It now says instructors may substitute a university issued or approved face shield for a face covering, that is a mask, if a face covering would unduly hamper classroom instruction. Of course, face coverings remain required for instructors at all other times, on the way into their class, on the way out of their class, if they're on campus for some other reason. So I wanted to just alert everybody to that change in language. And I know that we're all being very careful about our masking, our physical distancing, our hand washing, avoiding large gatherings, and all of those topics. So a second topic I wanted to address was our post-spring break modalities. We all saw President Gable's announcement last week confirming that the Twin Cities campus would not be pivoting post-spring break. My expectation is that instructors will continue to offer their classes in the modality as planned. Some instructors may have planned for and previously announced a shift to distance education after spring break, and that's fine. I don't want to change the modality as announced for each course on the syllabus at this stage. So I think whatever you were planning on doing post-spring break, you should continue to plan to do. A third topic is vaccinations. President Gable mentioned the rollout plans. As our spring semester progresses, we anticipate that more of our students are going to become eligible for vaccinations. Doses are scarce and appointments are tightly scheduled. So I want to clarify that an appointment to receive a vaccination or a first dose or a second dose should be counted as a legitimate absence for a class. We have updated our FAQ surrounding this policy, which didn't necessarily connect to that particular case, but I just wanted to make sure that everybody understood that this was something that we would be permitting. As we progress through the spring semester, we start thinking about final exams and online assessment tools. As instructors consider how best to assess student learning, we encourage you to consider if e-proctoring would or would not facilitate your pedagogical goals. As you know, universities across the nation have recently experienced both a significant increase in academic dishonesty cases and simultaneously significant concerns about privacy protections and inequities in the use of digital proctoring services. We ask that each instructor considers the strengths and drawbacks of using these tools. My message that I send out will include a link to a short write-up from the Center for Educational Innovation that can provide guidance. We also have consultants available to help any instructor as they think through this decision. We're further creating a tool for students who want to take an online proctored exam somewhere on the Twin Cities campus other than not in their residence. So this will allow them to find a space, to reserve a space, either in a computer lab or in a regular classroom if they want to use their own laptops. After the spring semester ends, we have commencement. As President Gable mentioned, we are planning for in-person, well, we're planning for the option for in-person commencements. I should be careful about that. In spring 2020, our abrupt pivot meant that we needed a centrally planned remote commencement ceremony. In spring 21, we're empowering each college and campus to plan their own commencement, which could be fully virtual, or it may include some in-person component. Anything that's planned needs to be consistent with state guidance for gatherings. There are recommendations that are coming from a commencement, summer orientation, and summer camp planning group to the Minnesota Department of Health, and who will likely make recommendations to the governor about capacities and other kind of guidance. So we've developed a unique commencement sunrise form. It's being distributed to each unit. Forms are due in mid-March, and we plan for specifics about each commencement to be available in early April for our currently scheduled May commencement dates. After commencement, we move into summer. So registration for summer courses opens today. Planning for summer included the continuation of 6 feet physical distancing and mask requirements. However, because we offer many fewer summer classes, for instructors who wish to teach in person, at least on the Twin Cities campus, we have a lot of large rooms available that can accommodate physical distancing. For the summer, faculty retain autonomy on the choice of class modality, and the revised SN grading scheme will still apply. After summer, we move into fall. The scenarios group continues to plan for 3 scenarios for fall 21: 6 feet physical distancing, 3 feet physical distancing, and no physical distancing. Given the uncertainty about which scenario we'll be in, we have delayed the dates by which the class schedule is due to the registrar. We note that course registration for students begins on April 12th. With progress in vaccinations and continued declines in cases, and after consultation with SCEP, FCC, SCC, leadership of MSA, PSG, and COGS, on the Twin Cities campus, we have seeded the fall 21 schedule with the schedule that was offered in fall 2019. If instructors intend to teach in a modality not traditionally used for that course, there are proposals to change modalities, and they should follow the existing policies and practices for approval on each campus or college or unit. While we're looking forward to a primarily in-person fall, if physical distance continues to be necessary, we will, of course, again pivot. We are all acutely aware that we don't have all the information we need for this decision. We'll be monitoring the public health situation closely, including vaccination rates, new variants, CDC and MDH guidance. We'll, of course, consult with our own public health experts and faculty and student governance to decide if we'll need to pivot and how we'll do that. I know that uncertainty is difficult, but it is important that we all continue to remain flexible during these uncertain times. Finally, as we look ahead, we want to make sure that we not only think about going back to campus, but also think about how best to move forward. President Gable asked me and a small group to collect input on lessons learned from this pandemic experience that we want to consider incorporating into our permanent practice. In April, a short qualitative survey will be sent to faculty, staff, students, and parents, soliciting their ideas and perspectives, and we hope to hear from you and your constituencies. President Gable mentioned the extension of the work from home guidance. We're especially thinking about the role of remote work in the future and the implications for the best use of our physical space, although of course we seek input on any topic. I welcome any comments or input on these topics, either to me now or later, to SCEP Chair, Dr. Tom Chase, to FCC leadership, Dr. Phil Bowman, or to your representatives on any committees or leadership of your student governance organization. So I want to thank you again for your continued resilience and commitment to the university and our community. And I did not get any questions in advance, so I'll stop now and take questions from the floor.
Okay, next item is questions for the provost. Rachel, you're welcome to call on whomever you would like.
All right, I see 3 hands raised. I'm going to go in reverse order because I think that's how Zoom does it. So I think Rebecca might be first.
Hi, thanks so much. My name is Rebecca. I'm a CLA senator and I use she, her pronouns. Just to comment on flexibility, I of course think flexibility is imperative and important during these trying times. Just from a student perspective, I would like to throw out there that the more flexible and ambiguous information is, the harder it is for students to plan for housing in the fall. A lot of students were left with leases they didn't want. It was a lot of money that they could have been saving, or and forcing them to come back to campus without ample time to prepare housing could be at a large detriment financially to students. This was quite a large issue, especially last fall, with a lot of students being stuck with leases that they really didn't want to have because of the ambiguity of information being presented by administration. So I just wanted to throw that out there as a point of consideration. It's not really as much of an issue for faculty. Most of the time they already have established housing in the Twin Cities area, but for students it is a really large concern, especially considering commencement. A lot of students wouldn't be able to participate in in-person commencement because they were trying to be responsible and ended up giving their housing to go back home and live with their parents. So those were just the points that I wanted to make. Thank you for your time, and I hope you keep those in consideration as you continue distributing information to the student body.
Absolutely, thank you. And I fully agree, uncertainty is costly, and we are moving as quickly as we can in order to resolve all of the variants. Annie?
Hi, Provost Croson. I just have a question regarding your response to the universal SN grading resolution that was passed through the University Senate in the prior meeting. So in your response, you write that because circumstances differ on our different campuses and in different programs, these changes will apply to the Twin Cities undergraduate courses only, despite the resolution's request of the universal piece of the resolution in establishing universal guidelines. I would love to know how you got to that decision and which groups were consulted, specifically which student groups were consulted. Being the vice president of the Student Association, we were not consulted. I just would love to know who you talked to.
Sure. So primarily, of course, I talked to the chancellors and vice chancellors on the various campuses, and I relied on them to consult with their own student organizations. But I'm happy to talk with you kind of offline if you need more detail or if you want to investigate a particular campus.
Thank you.
Sure. Scott.
Hi, hi, Provost Croson. Scott Petty, Student Senator from CFANS. So this morning in the Student Senate, we had some guests come and talk from ASR. We had this like really rich, a great discussion among student senators about the pop-up, the kind of pop-up disclaimer on MyU that students had to endorse in order to register through MyU. I'm kind of hoping to tag team in my colleague Mattea Allert for the second part of this, just so I think will have the details better. But knowing your background as a game theorist who specialized in negotiation, one of the things that popped up was that students felt very much pressured to endorse this, and it seemed like kind of a take it or leave it contract offer. Although Mattea chimed in and said no, it actually wasn't, but they didn't really disclose this. And then there was some discussion of, well, did any students like back out after they had first read it, or did all students endorse it because they felt this overwhelming pressure to endorse it? And I was just kind of, and then as a second part, I would also be kind of curious about what consultation went into both the pop-up for the spring semester, the pop-up that went before the fall semester. You said that registration just opened, so I'm just guessing there's a new pop-up for the fall. So kind of these two questions, but I would like to tag team in Mattea Allert if she's here, because she was actually making some specific points of, no, you didn't actually have to endorse it. You could still register by paper and kind of go around this, but no one but her seemed to know it. So I was just kind of wondering if we can have a little bit of a conversation here as a carryover from the Student Senate, but exploiting your background as a game theorist who thought about negotiations and I would presume bargaining weights and things like that, that it just seems, it seems like very aggressive action from the university as a commercial agent. And I think listening to my undergraduate colleagues in the Student Senate, there seemed to definitely be a feeling of a kind of overwhelming pressure to endorse this, whatever its implications, and feeling that they had no option but to do this. Hopefully my question is coherent. Mattea, are you here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Can you chime in and kind of like make my comments more coherent?
Yeah, I guess there's just like sort of, I personally have a general concern about the pop-ups, and I heard these concerns in the Senate Committee on Student Affairs and also the Student Senate sort of earlier today. And the fact that, you know, their students don't technically have to agree to it, and the fact that that was not advertised at all is concerning. And also, I just sort of question the ethics of it. If a student has to go on one stop to either register for a class or put in a time card so they can get paid, you know, they don't necessarily have the space to you know, take a moment, read through the pop-ups, and then generate questions. And I'm just sort of wondering sort of how ethical it is to put students in a sort of highly pressurized situation like that, when they don't really feel like they have the option to say no or to pause and ask questions.
So thanks so much for the question. I understand that this has been discussed pretty extensively, and so I don't want to rehash the previous discussion. As we've said before, our intention was in no way to pressure people. Our intention was to make sure that everybody had the information they needed in order to register. And when we realized that the text was being read in incorrect way, we adjusted the text and hopefully got more clarity. But we welcome more feedback about how we might provide the information that students need in order to make sure they make an informed decision in the future. So I think the next comment is Ellen.
Okay, I think, am I on voice? Thank you
Yes.
very much, Provost Croson. I'm, oh, it says start my video. Wow. Okay. I'm a little confused about what's going to happen with teaching modalities next and staff modalities next year. And I do realize that this is an ever-changing situation, but from my deep dive into COVID studies, it appears that it's not going away, that we are going to need booster shots, that it's not 100% effective, and particularly in the face of variants. So I am concerned about the choices that faculty and staff will have to do work remotely versus in person. And I think it's even more complicated for students, particularly undergraduate students, because if their particular department or major is offering mainly remote, mainly in-person classes, and if they have underlying conditions or vulnerabilities to COVID, even if vaccinated, how will they take the required courses if most of the courses are offered in person and they can't put themselves in that situation? So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but I am concerned for faculty, staff, and students who for one reason or another, are vulnerable.
So I share your concern about vulnerability, which is why we are continuing to rely on public health guidance and our public health experts as we navigate our way through the fall. Yeah, Nancy?
Thanks. Just a fairly brief comment, which is I'm a PNA senator representing the PNA Senate. I'd like to make a comment not on behalf of everyone in the PNA Senate, but certainly on behalf of at least some of my colleagues, which is related to both working from home and vaccinations, which is that many of us in the PNA Senate, though not all, have been able to continue working from home throughout this whole pandemic, or to go in very limited amounts. And I think that I speak for at least some of us when I say that we would really like to see the university make plans for vaccinating our colleagues who have had to go into campus throughout all this, across campus. So custodial, facilities, and food service employees. I would love to hear more about any plans that we might have to prioritize those staff members. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your question. And I think, as President Gable said, and she can chime in here as well, we need to follow pretty rigorously the prioritization that the state is giving us. But I fully agree that people whose jobs involve in-person contact should have a higher priority than people whose jobs don't require that. But we'll be advocating for that with the state and implementing the state's guidance.
Thank you.
I don't see any more questions, so I'm going to turn the floor back to President Gale.
Thank you, Provost Croson, and thank you, everybody, for the questions. Item 10 is the FCC SCC report. I'll call on Professor Bullman to give this report. Bill?
Thank you, President Gable. 2.5 months ago have passed since the last report of the FCC and the SEC chair, and much has happened in this time in the governance. So I will respect everybody's time and I will minimize overlap with the report from President Gable and Provost Croson. As mentioned by President Gable, FCC Vice Chair and Chair-elect Ned Patterson and I continue to participate in the weekly meetings of President Gable with her leadership team, as well as the Provost Scenario Advisory Team. And so numerous times we have followed up on those meetings by relaying information to governance committees, consulting with those committees on topics that came up, and eventually bringing back feedback to President Gable and Provost Croson's teams. So many other times it was me and Ned who have brought up new topics that were brought up from you to President Gable and Provost Croson. What I would like to do today is, since so many topics have already been kind of mentioned by President Gable and Provost Croson, I would just like to highlight 3 topics. So first one would be that for many weeks, there was significant speculation whether we might pivot to fully remote instruction after spring break. Last week, we heard from President Gable that we will return from spring break to courses delivered in the same manner as instructors described that at the start of the semester in their syllabi. I know that many faculty, students, and staff members were very pleased about the timeliness of President Gable's message. The FCC will take a little bit of credit for relaying that message to President Gable and relaying to her your desire for a timely decision. And I'm really thankful that President Gable has listened to you. And I will specifically, in response to the comment from Student Senator Rebecca Jacobson just earlier, I would want to emphasize too that FCC leadership specifically had in mind that students would want to know about decisions post spring break because of their housing situation. And so I also want to point out, it was really gratifying to read from one of my faculty colleagues from a very different department from mine, who came back after President Gable's message and said, yes, this is exactly what we needed. So that's for sure feedback we love to hear. I want to move on to my second topic I wanted to address. The FCC was also paying much attention to the issue of online proctoring, the topic that Provost Croson has mentioned, and a topic really that was brought to the FCC, both by faculty and by students. And so following initial discussions with FCC, Provost Croson and Vice Provost Ropers, the Center of Educational Innovation put together an excellent fact sheet for the FCC, and that really in record time, and really on just a couple of days with a lot of time pressure. Subsequently, the Vice President of the Senate, Carol Chomsky, the Chair of the Senate Committee on Educational Policy, Tom Chase, and the Chair of the Student Academic Integrity Committee, Ken Leopold, and I, we met with student representatives from the Minnesota Student Association and really had an incredibly productive and an insightful meeting, which I really, actually we all enjoyed it. So following that meeting, the FCC urged Provost Croson to share with faculty guidance and background information on online proctoring as well as alternatives. And you've just heard about that from Provost Croson a couple of minutes ago. I also want to emphasize, when I just used the word urged, yes, as it's true, we very much wanted that, but at the same time, it was really very easy to convince Provost Croson. So I really have to emphasize it was a pleasure working on this topic with her. And I would like to thank also particularly Bob Rubini from the Center of Educational Innovation for that excellent collaboration that really resulted in results in record time. And so the governance committees and the provost will continue to work together with students to best serve students in this manner. Let me come to the final topic I want to quickly mention. As I mentioned in an FCC chair report in the fall semester, the leadership of the student, civil service, P&A, and faculty consultative committee started this academic year a new tradition, a tradition of meeting on a regular basis to improve communication between the different branches of governance and to prepare agenda items for the upcoming Senate consultative meetings. So I want to thank particularly the student leaders, Briggs Topol and Gunnar Fromm, for informing us at the most recent of those meetings about the advancement of the Student Senate resolution on the demilitarization of all University of Minnesota policing forces. Per request of the Student Senate, this resolution will be for discussion on the agenda of the March meeting of the University Senate. The Student Senate has approved this resolution this morning with 39 votes in favor and 2 votes in opposition. And so the FCC understands that this topic may stir up emotions, and we urge all the senators to join this discussion with an open mind and heart, with an understanding that one's personal experiences can be very different from the experiences of others on the campus, on other campuses. And so we do expect a vote on this issue at the Senate University meeting in April, after senators will have had the chance, the time to consult with their constituencies and to think through this topic. This ends my report. Back to you, President Gabel.
Thank you, Phil. Okay, item 11 concerns approval of several educational policies. So I want to call to your attention that the revisions to those policies were minor. So the proposal is to approve all policies with 1 vote. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I want to call attention to the fact that this vote is for members of the Faculty Senate only. So with that notation, host, please initiate the poll.
You have about 10 more seconds if you wish to vote. And last call. There being 90 ayes, 0 nays, and 15 abstentions, the motion prevails.
Thank you. Item 12 is discussion and action on proposed changes to the diversity and social justice liberal education theme. So following the process for major proposals, this proposal was discussed at the December 3rd, 2020 Senate meeting before coming to the Senate for action. All University Senate members may participate in the discussion, but Twin Cities faculty senators will vote. So for this one, I am calling on Professor Catherine Pearson to present this item.
Thank you, President Gable. And thank you for inviting me back to today's Senate meeting in my capacity as chair of the Council on Liberal Education to further discuss the proposed Race, Power, and Justice in the United States required theme course. Today, I'm joined by Professor Keith Mays, a member of the CLE as well, and the Faculty Senate, who will also provide some opening remarks and join me in answering questions. All of the CLE members have been actively involved in this process, and several CLE colleagues are attending today as well. During the discussion, some will add their perspectives on our motivation to propose this change and our consultative process. I shared the background at the last Senate meeting, but I want to highlight some key points about the process again today. Over the summer, Provost Croson initiated a conversation about requiring that all undergraduates who begin starting in fall 2021 take a diversity and social justice in the United States theme course. As CLE chair, I brought this initiative to the Council on Liberal Education. The council was enthusiastic about requiring the diversity theme. As you know, undergraduates are currently required to take 4 of 5 liberal education theme courses, along with 7 cores. Diversity and social justice in the United States is one of the theme options, but about 28% of undergraduates do not take a DSJ course. Our proposal would not add to students' course load. Students would still take 4 theme courses, the RPJ theme, and then 3 of the remaining theme requirements. The Council on Liberal Education members felt strongly that we didn't want to require the current DSJ theme without improving the requirements to substantively include systemic inequality and racial justice. Understanding systemic racism and its history is central to understanding power and justice in the United States. We are failing our students if they don't learn about systemic racial inequality in the United States and give them the tools to analyze it and its implications. Minnesota has stark racial inequities in education, wealth, housing, healthcare, criminal justice, the environment, and is the site of George Floyd's killing. In seeking to update the requirements, we began by considering changes to the DSJ requirements that the Liberal Education Redesign Committee proposed a couple of years ago. We consulted with faculty from LERC, the Redesign Committee, who spent a lot of time drafting the proposed changes in the DSJ requirements in the overall LERC proposal. Incorporating that input, CLE further improved it. We then consulted with faculty across the university, particularly faculty of color, including faculty from CBS, CEHD, CFAN, CLA, CSE, and Carlson. Not everyone responded, but I had in-depth Zoom conversations or email exchanges with around 20 faculty. Faculty were largely supportive of the proposal and suggested some helpful improvements. With that feedback, along with feedback from 2 SCEP meetings, an FCC meeting, and the last Senate meeting, members of the Council on Liberal Education met several times for many hours to refine the new proposed requirements, which you have in front of you: race, power, and justice in the United States. Students are asking for this change. Undergraduates have reached out to me asking for such a change. On Tuesday, the MSA passed a resolution with 85% in support of endorsing this proposal, and MSA President Amy Ma has expressed her support. A commonly asked question concerns current DSJ classes. Classes that now meet the DSJ requirements would still meet the RPJ theme. They would go up for re-review by the CLE under their normal schedule. At that point, DSJ courses would either have to fulfill the new requirements or lose their certification. The CLE has worked very hard on this proposal. It is not perfect, and the next time all liberal education requirements are considered, it may make sense to modify it as part of a larger proposal. But we feel strongly that this requirement can't wait until the next redesign. It is critically important that we ensure all University of Minnesota undergraduates understand how racially based social, economic, cultural, and political inequalities have been constructed and perpetuated in the United States, and that they explore how these inequalities have created deep systemic injustices, particularly toward Black, Indigenous, and other communities of color. I'll now turn over the virtual microphone to my CLE colleague, Professor Keith Mays.
I think my video is not allowing me to work. So can you guys hear me? I'm gonna take that as a yes, that
Yes,
you
we
guys
can
can
hear
hear me. Okay, so the video won't turn on for whatever reason. I wanted you guys to see my wonderful background here in Los Angeles. It's actually quite nice. I won't rub it in. Oh, maybe I can start. Oh, the host. Oh, there it is. Maybe you guys can see me. Okay. So race is and has always been a central organizing principle in the institutional life in the United States, to the extent that it has created inequalities in a plethora of areas: education, housing, employment, wealth, etc. The historical inequalities that are race-based have produced the current disparities often absent in our educational knowledge and learning spaces. If we as higher education institutions do not lead on this issue, we abdicate our responsibility of producing tomorrow's thought leaders. I see no better way than to require students to take classes having the race, power, and justice theme attached to them. Tomorrow's thought leaders, our students, will find themselves in positions of power and authority in both the private and public sectors of the economy. Many will create their own companies where they will make decisions based on hiring and firing people who can affect the livelihoods and life outcomes of people of color. The practical application of RPJ themes learned in U of M classes will develop individual racial mindsets and help positively shape the racial landscape in a cross-section of institutions. Finally, I want to add that the University of Minnesota often talks about its commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. In fact, it is a stated goal and value the university has embraced and promoted over the years. But often in predominantly white institutions today, diversity and inclusion has become more a colorblind rather than a color conscious perspective and policy. It celebrates all while embracing none. The race, power, and justice theme proposal will reset and reestablish racial power and privilege as the central fact in American life, not a marginal practice of a few bad actors of a bygone era. Making the decision to require RPJ will underscore the centrality of equity and D&I initiatives, making it a priority in our curriculum. I just appeal to you guys from the head. I would like to just briefly appeal to you guys from my heart, and just to say that this is extremely important. Windows of opportunity that tragically and unfortunately was opened up by the murder of George Floyd last May, allows institutions like the University of Minnesota to create the kinds of changes that it needs to create. And I'm afraid that once we pass the trials that are coming up, and we will enter into another academic calendar year, 2021, 2022, that window of opportunity to make this serious change in the curriculum, that window will close. And it will take another tragic event around race, unfortunately, to reopen and reestablish the window and to place in front of the conversation that which is needed to make the kinds of changes that we need to make. The University of Minnesota, all PWIs need to be at the forefront of the issue. And so I'm appealing to both hearts and minds on this issue. At that point, I'll turn it back over to Catherine Pearson. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Keith. We're ready for questions.
Okay, thank you both, Catherine and Keith, and everyone that you worked with. I'll open the floor to discussion. Catherine, I'll let you drive this portion.
Michael Kaiba.
Thank you. So, Chair Pearson, I'm a member of the FCC, as you know, and this idea came through the FCC not too long ago. And there was a fairly extensive discussion at the end of the meeting about the kind of extremely biased political language that was used to to describe this course requirement, and also to define the types of courses that would be acceptable under this requirement. And as you know, the provost was there, and there was also, after that meeting, some email exchanges about suggested alterations to try to make the language somewhat more kind of politically neutral. And I was very disappointed to see that nothing of all of that discussion at all made it into the final text. So I just like you to speak about the decision making process and why that is that we can't make this language a little bit more politically neutral.
So thank you. We considered your email, considered your feedback. We had extensive consultation with many faculty. And in fact, one of the suggestions from the FCC was to make clear that it was an and/or in bullet point 1, if anyone is looking at the RPJ proposal in front of them, to clarify that a range of courses would count. And per the FCC's suggestion, we did make that change. But I want to be clear that we're not telling people what to think. We're giving them the tools, the scholarly research on the systemic racism that exists, the inequalities that are embedded in society, and we're preparing students to do their own analysis, giving them their own tools to do this. There's extensive scholarship that these differences are real, and that the racially based social, economic, cultural, and political inequalities have been constructed and perpetuated in the United States. And there are many different forms that a new RPJ course could take. It could focus on the environment and how this is being played out in environmental policy. It could focus on politics, economic policy. So I just want to clarify that we talked about your feedback, but we're not telling students what to think. We're giving them the tools and the scholarly research to help them think about these issues systematically.
Can I follow up?
Yeah, I'm actually going to ask Professor Mays if he wants to jump in on here on this as well. He was part of these discussions.
Michael, you can follow up, and then I'll just answer.
So, considering the types of courses that can qualify, I actually do think that there is kind of a strong political aspect of what to think as opposed to how to think. So, for example, if someone were teaching a course on these important issues, these inequalities, and they came to the conclusion and taught in that course that the primary factor was failed social policies, corrupt implementation of failed social policies, and that was the biggest driver, and that in fact this notion of systemic racism was not, a primary factor or the primary factor. Reading your text, that course would not qualify, even though it deeply addresses, kind of in a kind of academic way, the information that's out there about these issues. And so I think that if you design a set of course requirements that requires a certain outcome of the faculty that are teaching it, then by definition, you're telling students what to think. You're engaging in that. You're not really engaging in how to think. So that was really my biggest concern, besides just the overt inflammatory language in the title and all the rest. So I wonder if you could respond to that concern.
Well, I do want to respond that the CLE, takes our charge to review courses and provide feedback very seriously. And CLE members come from across the university, from across colleges and disciplines, and we do have experts in the study of race, but many other subjects as well. And so, these syllabi and the liberal education statements will be reviewed very carefully. And we would be remiss if we didn't ensure that each syllabus was very thorough and complete. And again, I think we look at the assignments, we look at the readings, we look at the course objectives. We're very thorough in this, and the current DSJ courses, they're teaching students how to think and how to critically analyze the scholarship that they're encountering. And I would expect that these courses would do the same.
The study of race, class, orientation, disability, any of the marginal subject positions doesn't tell students what to think any more than any of the hard sciences or anything that's coming out of engineering or medicine. And so I push back on that a little bit, Michael, only because that what tends to often be understood as a space of indoctrination. We only look at that when it comes to the marginal positions in American society, and especially when it comes to race. And race is politicized only when the responders of and the victims of racial oppression and white supremacy respond in a certain kind of way. All of the ethnic studies and all of the areas in which you mention are critical areas of study. Large bodies of research have been produced over the years. And so to say that the language is political or politicized is to marginalize these disciplines. And I think that if you would place that same barometer alongside other disciplines and other areas of study, you can make the same kind of case about all of us in this business who are not trying to tell people what to think, but we are telling people, we are educating folks about what's going on in the world. So I think it's unfair to single out the disciplines of ethnic studies, particularly those disciplines that study race.
Thank you
for those comments.
Thank you both. Mattea Allert.
Hi, let me just turn on my video. Hi, I am a student CSE senator, and I guess I just have some concerns about this and maybe concerns about what we're not talking about. So I'm a second generation American, so my family is not from the United States. And so when they sent me to college, you know, and said I should go become educated, they didn't necessarily have this in mind. So I'm just kind of confused about where this is coming from, because I feel like before we sort of start discussing taking steps to incorporate more diversity and social justice into our liberal arts education, we should maybe look at ourselves and say, what can we do better and how can we enhance the liberal arts undergraduate education experience in general before then jumping to the next step? Does that make sense?
Yes, let me see if I can address your question, and if I'm not getting exactly, if I'm not touching on exactly what you're getting at, you know, please help me. So in terms of liberal education requirements, you know, there are currently 7 cores that all undergraduates are required to take, and then undergraduates choose 4 out of 5 theme courses. And so this would require one particular theme course. And this is not to say that the other theme courses are not important. And indeed, students are still taking all but one of them. But it is recognizing the urgency of the moment, and it is recognizing that a lot of students come to the University of Minnesota from all over Minnesota and other states across the country, really not having studied these topics before, at least not in a systematic way, in a way that sort of goes beyond a celebration of diversity. And it's important that the University of Minnesota do what several other universities across the country are doing, and that is really respond to this moment and update our curriculum to where it needs to be in 2021. And so I appreciate what you're saying, but I sort of want to remind you of the holistic nature of all of the liberal education requirements and where this fits into the broader picture.
Right, but I guess my feeling is if a course is actually good and effective, they would talk about this in some way or be able to incorporate this in some aspect for the most part. Granted, I don't know all the CLA undergraduate courses that are offered at the university, but I feel like they would be able to incorporate sort of aspects of this without adding on an additional requirement. And I think it's important that we sort of step back and take a look at how are we training our students? What do we want them, you know, to be like? How do we want them to lead? And I'm just sort of questioning on if we should add this or if we should take a look at the quality of education we're giving our students.
So the quality of education we're giving our students is certainly a key issue that the CLE grapples with a lot in all of our requirements. And I guess I would just add that if a student wanted to take a lot of courses that grappled with these issues, that would certainly be possible. But as of now, 28% of University of Minnesota undergraduates do not take a diversity and social justice in the United States theme course. And so they're not grappling with these issues at all. And the CLE, has thought long and hard about this and thinks that this is the time for all students to take at least one course that grapples with these issues.
Okay, I guess I would like to push against that and say that, even though they may not be taking a course on it, they might actually be grappling with these issues outside of the assigned courses. And also, I guess, I just think it's a good idea to look at the quality of education, just because, I think that the quality could be improved significantly. So
thanks for your comments. Jennifer Rowe.
Hi, Catherine. I'm appreciative of all the work that the LE committee has done and included a lot of things I think that we had discussed in this gap and other conversations. So I really like how the proposal is looking now, and I wanted to hear more about two things. So first, about to what extent will there be instruction in racially inclusive and disability inclusive pedagogies? So the idea of teaching, like putting not only the content, but also the praxis, right? So will there be some sort of encouragement or incentive for faculty who have their courses approved for this LE designation to also deepen their pedagogy to become more racially inclusive? And the second thing was, I just would love to hear more about, I know you had mentioned some idea about a workshop, because my previous concern was people just sort of throwing race onto the syllabus, and you said that there might be some sort of workshops or intensive working groups or something. So I would just want to hear more about what futures or visions you might have had.
Great. Thank you for those questions. And I'm also going to let Professor Mays jump in on this one as well. And I had discussed the possibility of a workshop at one of the SCEP meetings, and that is something that we still hope happens in the distant future. But I really want to stress that whether or not a course meets these requirements is evidenced in the syllabus, in the assignments, in the liberal education statement. The CLE looks at these very hard, and some of you have probably been on the receiving end of that. Why am I getting a revise and resubmit instead of just an accept? Because we may know that you can teach this course, but unless it's clear in how you're presenting it on the syllabus to students, in the assignments, in the learning objectives, if it's not clear to us, it won't be clear to the students. And so we take all of the documentation that you provide us very seriously. And if a course does not pass muster, it will be returned or denied, sort of depending. In terms of pedagogy, I think those are excellent points. CLA as a college is working on that right now with sort of anti-racist pedagogy, but that is not something the Liberal Ed Committee specifically is doing. But I take your point that would be great across the university, not just in CLA.
Yeah, just to add really quickly, if praxis is certainly part of a proposal, that's all the better, only because what we understand to be abstract thinking that is really good to enrich our understanding of the world. How we apply those principles, how we apply the teachers are just as important. And so if a proposal comes through with that a kind of or perspective and approach, certainly when we create the criteria for accepting courses under the new LE requirements, certainly that could be part of it for sure. But thanks a lot for that question.
Catherine, if I can chime in, just because we still have a few people in the queue and we have a set amount of time allotted, and out of respect for additional items that are in the agenda, perhaps we can take the questions and then you can synthesize them into one set of responses if possible or where appropriate.
Great, thank you. Okay, I'll go in the order I think that they arrived. Jerry Cohen.
Sure, thanks. I just wanted to comment on, I'm Jerry Cohen, I'm CFAN's senator, and I wanted to comment on my colleague in the FCC's comment about fairness and balance. And I just want to point out that there are some of us who are far more progressive on this issue than your write-up, and we commend you on the fact that you made it much more conservative than necessary in order to appeal more broadly across things. And actually, I think it's very balanced. And if I was to do it, I guess my colleague in the FCC would be a lot less happy with it. But I want to thank you for doing that. I think you've done a fine job, both of you, and the Council for Liberal Education in general, which I don't always commend, as you know. So, so to get a compliment is a high honor. But I just wanted to put that out because I think balance is an interesting thing. It really depends on where you start, and I start on the left of that, so it's fine.
Thank you for your comments. Next was Wanda.
Hey, my name is Wanda. Thank you for bringing this about. I think it's really important. I'm just curious if it's been talked about, how will we protect our BIPOC students in these courses so that way they are not having to take on this extra work and effort of teaching their classmates and hearing these stories in the discussions, which is super important. And so I'm wondering if there's opportunities for students to be placed in different groups. I'm just wondering if you've thought about that and how that will work for all students. So that way all students can participate and feel safe and not have to do extra emotional labor.
That's a great question. And again, the syllabus is the artifact that we are looking at. And so I think that if we saw anything in the syllabus about participation that somehow seemed to put the onus on BIPOC students or something that was alarming, we would be attuned to that. But at a certain point, just as with everything, we do trust faculty. And so we'd be, alert to issues on the syllabus, but also trusting our faculty colleagues to provide the appropriate pedagogy. But that is an important consideration. Thank you. Sarani.
Thank you. My name is Sarani Milliken. I am the law student senator. The law school is currently grappling with kind of this sort of question as well. So I just want to share my experience so that you can take it into account for future steps. I'm very proud of the law school. We've brought a lot of course offerings that are critical race theory and the law oriented and just kind of situating how that is. And they're very fact and history oriented, which allows access to people on either side of the political spectrum. So that's been great. And so I have lived experience that tells me this can work well. But I am also wanting to point, my concern is kind of what Wanda brought up, which is the fact that now there is one course in the entire undergraduate syllabus, which a BIPOC student cannot escape. They're dealing with this every day of their lives. And now since it's required, there's going to be at least one course in which it's going to be particularly highlighted. And so I would really encourage the faculty to, as Mattea Allert had said, find ways to incorporate these things more broadly, so that all of the burden is not concentrated on this one class, and because it's important to consider because it impacts everything in our lives. But more importantly, that when we reconsider this, we keep in mind the burden we're imposing with every required course upon not the entire group, but perhaps a specific subset that perhaps needs to be protected a bit. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Thank you for these thoughtful comments. And just quickly, you're right in the sense that every student will be required to take an RPJ theme course, but there will be considerable variation among the RPJ classes. And so students will still have, multiple classes to pick and choose from under this one theme. But your comments are well taken. Thank you. Anna.
Hi, thank you. I'm from the Department of Biology Teaching and Learning, and this change wouldn't affect one of my classes that I teach, but I'm wondering, looking through the classes that do currently fulfill this theme, how many classes would no longer fulfill the theme, and has that been brought up from people who teach classes who would no longer fit into this theme, maybe because they're focused on gender inequalities or something like that? Is that a concern, or is that not something that we should be too worried about?
So this is something that we discussed extensively, and initially all current DSJ courses will still remain under the books and sort of would transfer to RPJ classes, even those that frankly aren't appropriate, until their next certification or a liberal ed redesign. And at the time they go up for recertification, faculty would, could either adapt them. I mean, some would need it right away. Faculty could adapt it, and some classes would be quite adaptable, and some classes would not be adaptable. Right now, there are more than enough DSJ seats for every single undergraduate to take a course, but over time, we will have to evaluate how this is working. Even on our own committee, the CLE, there are many of us that teach these courses, and some of us were like, yeah, I could really adapt my course, and some were like, my course would lose its DSJ status because it wouldn't fit, but that's okay. This is really important. Yeah. So
the department would have time to plan for that, I guess, so it's not a practical concern. Yeah, and then I just want to echo what Mattea said. I really feel like no matter what we teach, we should be thinking about race, racism, inequality in all its forms. I teach ecology and evolution. It's a huge part of my field as well. So I really echo that we should all be thinking about this and not, get out of it just because it's part of a requirement. Thanks.
Well put. Thank you. Juan, I think is next.
Hi, I just wanted to make a couple of comments as well. I just wanted to maybe push the body away from the conventional wisdom that Black, Indigenous, and people of color have an inherent expertise about their experiences. And so there's great power in seeing yourself represented in the curriculum, as well as learning about how to locate those experiences within society, how to make powerful applications of your own positionality. And then I also wanted to mention that, there is agency, and students will be able to choose from a very expansive set of courses that are available to them to learn a variety of different experiences. It's not just forcing them to learn about their own experiences.
Thank you very much. Scott.
Scott Petty, graduate senator from CFANS. I have a question of curiosity. And I apologize if this was covered at the last meeting. I had to leave to go to a different commitment, so I missed the very end of our last meeting. What's the distribution of these qualified courses across all 5 themes, and what's the distribution of courses, and I mean this by college, of these affected courses? As the goal is to take us from 72% participation to 100% participation. Which colleges are going to gain and which colleges are going to lose tuition revenue?
Good question, and I'm not sure that we have an answer for you. The majority of DSJ classes are taught by CLA faculty, but certainly not exclusively. And one of the reasons that we designed this so broadly, as you'll see in some of the bullet points, is to ensure that this would not be unique to CLA, that faculty in any number of colleges could propose a design class, an environmental class, any number of courses that would meet this.
But does that DSJ preponderance flow through the other 4 themes, or is the DSJ theme an outlier in terms of its college level concentration in CLA? I guess,
right.
Question.
Right. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but many of the themes actually have more CLA courses, but again, have courses from across the university. Zachary.
Yeah, hi. I'm Zach. I'm a CSE senator. I just wanted to echo some of the sentiments of the first gentleman that spoke. Can't remember his name, but Particularly, I'd just like to encourage that both sides of the argument are presented in any classes that are taught. Specifically, there's a former college professor named Thomas Sowell who's written extensively on this. And he's pointed out that a lot of these inequalities started around when the Great Society programs were enacted. So I really hope that anything going forward will present both views and not just one, so that it really is teaching them how to think about it rather than what to think.
Thank you, Zach. Mattea.
Hi. Student senator for CSE. And I guess I would just sort of like to build off of some of the things that were said. I have some concerns specifically about the BIPOC students in these classes, especially since faculty are not always able to recognize some of this stuff or even catch it, because I know of instances, I know undergraduate CLA students who have taken classes similar to these, and the minority students would get emails or personal messages through their social media from the other white students in their class about the topic, and that was incredibly hard and painful. And I've personally experienced this when stuff like this has been talked about. So you're sort of saying that you're going to protect your students, but you don't even know that these things are going on. So in addition to having to attend a class like this, then there's the extra burden of your classmates contacting you about certain things, either contents of the classes or starting to confess sort of the racial things that they've done, which is very odd. So I just am curious of how you're going to be protecting students from that type of behavior.
That is horrible, and I'm very sorry to hear that. And that is a bigger and really important conversation. And it's, I think, more than the CLE can do in this proposal, but this is an important conversation that we should all be having going forward. So I thank you for sharing that.
All right, thanks.
Rebecca?
Yes, I would just like to point out to everybody talking about teaching students what to think. As somebody who's taken a multitude of diversity and social justice classes, these professors are presenting science, psychological studies, political science studies, all extremely scientifically valid, just like they would be in the CSE. The science that they present you in courses in the CSE is always adopted. Of course, there's always some subjectivity surrounding the social sciences, and I do acknowledge that. However, if the science appears to be left-leaning, it's still science, whether people agree with it or not. If it appears to have a political bias, that's just what the science is at hand, and that's what we're teaching students, right? So I think it's important to note that what professors are teaching in these courses, a lot of which I've taken already, are already established scientific studies that have been going down through the ages and are often very well conducted scientific studies in relation to psychology, political science, sociology, etc. So I cannot say how strongly I support this bill. I think it's absolutely wonderful. The faculty I've had thus far who have taught diversity and social justice classes have always had great intersectionality and praxis. And ones who are not members of the BIPOC community have always made sure to speak only from what they can from the science and not from their own lived experiences. So good job to the ones who are doing it already, and I can't wait to see more doing it.
Thank you. I think Chris is going to call on people going forward.
Just looks like the last comment is Mark.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great, thanks. Catherine, thanks for all the hard work that you and the rest of the CLE have done on this. I don't know if this is more of a question or if it's a comment, but I have found in the discussions we've had here at the previous meeting and on the FCC, the justification for changing DSJ to RPJ seems quite compelling, especially given the events of the last year. What I find far less compelling is making it a required theme over the other 4 themes that we currently have. The idea being that when we promote something to a required course, we are sending the signal that it is more important than other things you might elect to take. And given that we're, sort of wrecking the climate and the environment, we're in the middle of a mass extinction where we're obliterating countless species, we're destroying ecosystems, we're turning the oceans to acid. Given that we just had a nearly successful armed insurrection on January 6th that could have completely disrupted the democracy in this country, creating a constitutional crisis, I'm not convinced that an RPJ theme is more important than the environment theme or the civic and ethics themes. And I'm sure other arguments could be made for the other themes. And so I wonder if you could just speak to the conversations you had and in reaching that decision to elevate
30 seconds
to elevate the RPJ, the new RPJ, I think I'm getting it right, at the cost of essentially visibly sending the message that you're demoting the other four. Thanks.
Thank you. So to remind people, the other themes are civic life and ethics, the environment, global perspectives, and technology and society. And those are all very important themes. I mean, we are reviewing classes and courses and all of these themes, and they are striking and they are important. And students will still take 3 of the remaining 4. And I do think that the next time liberal education is considered, that all of these theme courses should be part of the conversation. But the conversation that we have had in the CLE is that it is imperative and urgent that all undergraduates wrestle with systemic racial inequality now. Now is the opportunity, as Professor Mays said earlier. So, thank you.
Just to
follow up, you would say that would be that there's no timeliness to sort of wrecking the environment. So the timeliness argument is the thing that I'm not finding compelling in making this a required course. So I guess
it's greater than a timeliness, Mark. I would say that we're talking about COVID-19 as the latest pandemic, but those pandemics occur about once every 100 years. Racism is equally in a pandemic. It's a pandemic that has not gone away. We have not found a vaccination for racism in this country. So I would implore us to really think about this in a deep way, that racism is just as important as those other issues that you raised. And I think that we oftentimes have a difficult time dealing with the elephant in the middle of the street. And that's race. And we get a little discombobulated. We get a little bit, our blood pressure raises because of the way in which we have always suppressed our ability to sort of deal with racism and to really highlight it and underscore it and in a place where it should be, which is higher education institutions. Educational systems, if we don't lead on this, there's no other sector in society that will. And so I don't think it's just a moment in time because of the murder of George Floyd. I mean, the BIPOC community can point to you many kinds of experiences that they go through on a daily basis. And so I just would hope that we can turn the corner on this. We just seemingly we get stuck with having conversations about if something is important and real. And when are we going to finally move forward on this without having this type of debate that produces so much consternation and discombobulation? I'll stop there.
Just to be clear, the debate is not whether or not it's important. The question is whether race, social justice is more important than environment or civics and ethics. Just that was my point. And that's what I'm not yet convinced of. It's not, I'm totally convinced it's important. Absolutely 100% agree. I'm just not convinced it's more important than
2 minutes are expired.
Some of the other. Thank you.
Thank you. Jack.
Hi, I'm Jack Flom, they, them, representative from the SSCC from MSA. So I'd like all of us to kind of put yourself back in the shoes of when you were on May 26, 2020, right after George Floyd was murdered in Minneapolis. And I'd like you to say, oh, well, we should wait about the timeliness on that day. Because there's been more than enough timeliness for the past 500, 600 years where slavery has existed in this continent. And the fact that my BIPOC friends and queer friends and myself as a queer person live with the fact that I'm a minority and that it's basically required already to live with that. So I think that, people who aren't like minorities should be required to learn this. And yes, the environment's important. I'm not saying it isn't, but like there's also other problems that are more important than the environment too, like for real.
Thank you, Jack. I'm going to jump in because as deeply important as this topic is, we do want to maintain the timing. So we have a few people in the queue. If you have, we have 2 questions remaining from people who have not had a chance to ask a question yet. We'll allow those 2 questions to proceed, and then we'll stop the discussion. So that leaves Ellen and Carl.
Thank you. I think Carl raised his hand first.
Great. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Carl Flink from FCC. I'm also the director of the dance program. I feel a strong level of endorsement for this program. And I just want to express that one of the reasons why I find this a compelling proposal is that all of the other subjects that we've talked about, climate, civil duty, technology, they all have lenses that have racialized elements to them. And this program is offering us an opportunity to give tools to a broad part of our student body to bring different lenses to all of these endeavors. And I certainly hope that all of our courses are trying to bring this subject matter into them, but to have a targeted course material that's giving our students tools to bring into all of these important subject matters feels to me a compelling argument for why we're putting it forward, not ahead, but we're highlighting it right now at this point in time.
Thank you. And last comment from Ellen Messer-Davidow.
Okay. All right, I don't know how to do the video. I wanted to respond to Mark B's comment. Yes, it's undeniable that the pandemic, the environmental degradation, and the Capitol insurrection are catastrophic events, and they need study, they need analysis, and they need problem solving and action. However, race and racism flow into and structure what goes on in these 3 arenas and many others. So we already see that much higher percentages of African Americans, of indigenous peoples, of Mexican Americans, and so on, are being infected by COVID, have less access to vaccination, and so forth. We all witnessed the racist symbols that were displayed at the Capitol insurrection. We all know about toxic environmental dumps and air that cause problems in minority communities, and also, of course, all 3 of these events are structured by socioeconomic class as well as race and ethnicity. So my point is very simple. These are not separable catastrophes from racism and classism. They are intricated. And so that opens up the door to many, many more courses on environment, on pandemic, and other subjects that need to bring racism and classism into their purview.
Thank you, Ellen.
Okay, thank you all very much. And thank you to Catherine and Keith for bringing this forward and for stewarding the discussion. So I'm going to call the vote on the motion, but with a reminder that only Twin Cities faculty senators can vote. So Chris, if you'll initiate the poll.
Give about 10 more seconds if you wish to vote. And last call. There being 67 ayes, 15 nays, and 8 abstentions, the motion does prevail.
Thank you all very much. All right. Item 13 concerns the Senate Committee on Committees Guiding Principles for Committee Appointments. It's presented for information. Item 14 is old business. There is no old business. Item 15 concerns new business. Please note that any new business will be referred to committee unless special permission is granted by 2/3 of those voting and present. Is there any new business? Seeing none, I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Ben, do you want to adjourn? I'm offended. Is there a second?
I think we worked hard and earned it.
Yes, fair. Any discussion? Supposed to feel call the poll, or do we need to do a poll on this? I guess we do.
All right, 10 more seconds. And last call. Being 164 ayes, no nays, and abstention, motion prevails.
Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you all very, very much. Enjoy the rest of your day.